Hello everyone, and thank you so much for attending our webinar regarding recent developments in U.S. immigration policies. Today, we will be focusing particularly on how these new changes impact student visa holders. My name is Anita Mehrazarine, and I'm the Professional Events Chair of the National Iranian American Law Students Association. And we're very excited to be partnering with the Iranian Students of California to bring you this event tonight. Very quickly, before we jump into the session, I would like to go over this disclaimer with everybody. So this webinar is provided for informational and educational purposes only. The information discussed is intended to provide general information about recent immigration laws and should not be construed as legal advice. Participation in this webinar, submitting questions, or receiving responses from the panelists does not create an attorney-client relationship between participants and the speakers or organizers. Participants should not rely on any statements made during this webinar as a substitute for seeking advice from a qualified legal counsel regarding their specific circumstances. The views expressed by each speaker are their own and do not necessarily reflect the views of the organizers or any affiliated organizations, and no statement made by any panelist should be attributed to the organizers unless expressly stated. Now, I'd like to invite our very amazing panelists to introduce themselves. Welcome. Rojin June, if you would like to start, we could just go in the order. Yes.
I'm unmuted. Oh, there we go. Sorry, I couldn't unmute myself. Good evening. My name is Rojin Mozaffar-Mer. I'm the managing partner of Immicore Law. I practice business immigration and family immigration a bit, work a lot with students. I also serve on the national board for the Iranian American Bar Association, and I'm really honored to be here with all of you this evening. So thanks for having me. Shahpour might have the same problem I had.
Would you like me to go first? Sure. So I'm Shahpour Matloob of Matloob Law Office, private solo immigration practice in Oakland, and I do mostly family immigration, but also asylum removal and a little bit of business immigration. I'm as of last September, I'm also UC Berkeley's immigration attorney, advising legal permanent resident students, faculty, and staff, and taking care of their cases as well. Thank you. I'll pass it to Yalda.
Hi, everyone, and thank you for having me on our other panelists here. Nice to meet everyone. I am the founder and principal attorney at my firm, YH Global Immigration. I do mostly employment-based immigration for high-skilled individuals, but I also do some family-based immigration and a little bit of asylum work. And prior to starting my firm, I was an attorney at a boutique immigration firm in Washington, D.C., and I live in the DMV area. So thanks so much for having me. Oh, I'm also on the board. I'm vice president of IABA, DC's chapter, and I'm the DC rep for National IABA.
Thank you all so much for introducing yourselves. We are so grateful to have you. And so we're just going to jump right in. We have so many questions. We're going to talk about our first topic. First general topic is going to be recent immigration laws and policy changes. All speakers obviously are not required to answer every question, but I encourage you, if you feel you have something to add, to do so. So our first question is, can you briefly discuss the 2026 travel ban and the impact on students? What legal avenues remain for Iranian students already in the U.S. who need to review their status without triggering a re-entry ban?
I'm happy to start. And so, as most of everyone on this call knows, so there has been a travel ban since June 2025 for anyone from Iran. So it's an entry ban, which means that if they're not going to be issuing new visas. Unlike the first travel ban, where there were a bunch of exceptions and exemptions and ways to overcome the ban, they didn't do those carve outs. There's a few carve outs that were there up through December, for example, for immediate relatives and things like that. Those also kind of went away. Um, but for students specifically, there's no avenue to file for an F1 visa abroad right now as an Iranian national. That has been suspended for and so the impact on students is really once you're here, you're stuck here. Exiting will trigger that travel ban. But I'll pause there and turn it over to my panelists for anything further.
Yeah, I think you summed it up great, Regine. And I will talk about this probably throughout the presentation, but there is a distinction between travel ban and then the pause, right? And we can get to the pause later. And I think a big question that I see lingering in the community is what options do we have? And this is where, as immigration attorneys, we have to sit back, take a deep breath, and say, it's not the greatest situation right now, because as Regine pointed out, the exceptions that were present have been eliminated. I mean, there's like ethnic minority exceptions to the travel ban. I haven't worked on any personally. It's not super prevalent. So yeah, unfortunately for students right now, if you're on that F1 visa, just do a good job, go to your classes, don't violate the terms of your status, until, we see some of these changes getting lifted. I think Shahpour probably, yep, there you go.
Okay, I got it now. Okay. The one thing I'd like to add is for those few who may have had a valid visa before the travel ban and their visa may still be valid. Some Iranians, depending on their course, what they're studying, they could have a 2-year visa that may still be valid. In those cases, I suggest consulting with if you need to travel. If you absolutely need to travel, then consult with an immigration attorney to determine whether it's a good idea to travel and return while your visa is still valid, with the understanding of the risk that while you're out, it's possible that your visa may get revoked. So it's always a risk. But those who still have a valid visa may have that option. Thank you.
Thank you guys so much. And as always, if one of the questions, is repetitive in some ways, please feel free to skip over the repetitive parts. So let's move on to the second question. And that is, what recent policy changes have had the biggest real world impact on international students in the past year?
I think Yalda touched on it, but
Yeah.
really it's the pause. Do you want to take it, Yalda?
Yeah, sure. And, feel free to jump in, Shahpour and Regine June. Yeah, the pause I'm seeing has been the biggest drawback for Iranian students, because you're already here. And then what the adjudication pause is saying, which there was a little bit of an update on this yesterday, but unfortunately doesn't impact Iranian students specifically, is that you basically cannot get a decision on your case, whatever case you have filed. So it's pretty unfortunate, especially for students that are graduating and want to file for OPT, because now the EAD for the OPT is not going to get adjudicated. So it has put students in a difficult position. I will say that's worse than not being able to come in the first place, give or take, of course, given the current circumstances, because you're already here, right? Now you're stuck. If you haven't had a chance to come here, well, you're still going on and living your life the way that you were. And yeah, I think that's been a huge drawback. Yeah, I'll stop there and see if Regine or Shahpour June want to add anything.
I will say that just in speaking with students, I think the hard thing is sort of navigating what to do, right? I think just highlighting that the pause is a pause on the adjudication of benefits, but you can apply for benefits. So I just want to clarify that if you are finishing your program in the next month or two and it's time to file for your post-completion OPT EAD, go ahead and do it because you can and you should file it. It's just that once it's filed, as long as the pause is there, the EAD is not going to come through. And that's where talking to an attorney and sort of figuring out what to do is, the strategy for now. But just want to clarify that don't hold off from applying from benefits. So, and then for students who, for example, you have an approved I-140 and you're ready to file for your I-485 for your green card, don't hold off from that. Go ahead and file because you can file it. And there'll be probably more questions about this, but just want to clarify that you can file for the benefit. They're just not adjudicating them.
The one thing I'll add that we may get into for other questions as well is that even if you're finishing your degree, you may have the option of applying for another degree so you can continue maintaining your status, even if you can't get OPT.
Yep.
So just to be clear, the pause on adjudications is on USCIS adjudications, not on issuance of I-20s. New I-20s for international students.
Thank you guys so much. So I think we could go to question 4 since you guys did such a great job. You answered 2 and 1. So the question 4 will be, do you think there is any chance that the pause on change of status for physicians inside the US will be lifted soon? And maybe we could talk generally about, would you recommend filing a lawsuit with short timelines, maybe a few months or less?
So I will say, in speaking with some of the orgs that have sued, so lots of you have seen some law firms that are doing very targeted lawsuits on the pause. I did see that one of the challenge lawsuits has a declaration from a physician org, and they shared their stories of how they're being impacted. The thing is, a lot of these lawsuits were filed in the last 30 to 45 days. So the way that this works is the government has 60 days to answer. So we haven't gotten to that point where we're seeing anything. We haven't really heard anything. There's nothing specific that I can say I've heard about physicians, but like the pause being lifted on physicians specifically, it would be really nice, especially since there's a need. I will say that there has been quite a bit of advocacy on trying to uplift the story that many physicians, especially those who will go and serve underserved communities. If you're, for example, on J1 and you need to get the waiver of your 2-year home residency requirement, they're trying to draw attention to those stories because it does impact those communities pretty intensely. So whether recommending, I can't give you legal advice, but I would say, make sure you vet the attorneys that you're considering and, the claims that they're considering. There's some good people out there doing some really good work. Just do your homework is what I would say.
I'd like to add that I've heard just this week from an attorney who does file a lot of these kind of lawsuits. And he was the one that told recently, he would tell me that he does not believe USCIS would ever retaliate. And my position was, I don't call it retaliation, but I call it, in my own experience, because I've seen it for my own client, if USCIS is not ready for whatever reason to adjudicate, and now because of the pause, they can't even adjudicate, then they're being forced to make a decision. And that decision may be a negative decision. So in my view, so just to follow up on that, so this attorney now this week emailed me on a lawsuit that he recently had filed for individuals who were on J1 and spouse on J2, this exchange visitor visa. They're pending I-45 for residency, and the San Jose office denied their I-45 as a result of having filed a lawsuit. Well, we don't know exactly because of that, but in response to having filed the lawsuit. Now, the I-45s, even though they should be on a pause, so I haven't seen the denial decisions. I don't know how they denied it, because even denials should be on a pause. but they still went ahead and denied. Oh, I think he said that the judge actually, in that case, ordered the pause unconstitutional for that specific case. And then the San Jose office went ahead and denied those I-45 residency applications. So anybody considering a lawsuit should always, in my view, be prepared for a negative, possibly a denial decision or negative repercussions, which is why, as Rujin mentioned, always got to speak to an attorney to make that kind of decision before proceeding to an immigration attorney experienced in doing such lawsuits.
Yeah.
I don't have anything to add there.
Yeah.
Okay, amazing. Thank you guys so much. I think we're going to move on to our next section, which is about OPTs. So our first one will be, what are some important things to know while waiting for OPT or applying for OPT?
I can talk about applying and its preparation. You know, as soon as you're ready to file, so like 90 days before graduating, I would do that. I would not wait till last minute. I have heard horror stories from individuals that I've had consultations with. So be timely, I would say. And then waiting for OPT. That's sort of a gray area right now, right? Because of everything we just talked about with the pause and that you might not get a decision on it just yet.
I would add two sort of procedural things on the same line of what Yalda was talking about. You have 30 days from when your I-20 is endorsed, when it's signed, to file your I-765. And in similar horror stories, people waited to the last minute to file their I-765 EAD applications. The I-20 endorsement period had passed, they got denied. They're not really nice when you do motions to reopen and reconsider on those cases. And I've seen it. People have asked, "Can you please do it?" I'm like, "You're not going to get it," and it doesn't come through. So just be really cognizant about your deadlines. So if you're, getting your I-20, look at that date. Try to file within the first 2 weeks of getting it endorsed. Just get everything together and do your I-765 so it's timely filed. And this is also another procedural thing. Make sure you've got money in the bank or your credit card limit isn't over. And I know that sounds really like let's like, why are you saying that to me? The number of people in the last decade that I've had come to me and say, oh, my credit card got declined. I think I had a charge pending I wasn't aware of. And they don't care at USCIS because if it comes, and it takes them a while to reject a filing. And that's if you don't file online. These are paper filings. So if you file online, you'll know a little bit quicker. But just make sure that you are you're what you or have the amount and everything like that. Really basic stuff, but just things that I've seen in terms of preparing for applying.
Uh, I'll add to that. I agree with everything that was said, but with the addition that for Iranians and all those other nationalities that the pause apply to, you cannot count on the OPT
No.
at this point.
Yeah.
You definitely agree with having filed it timely and everything that was said, but you can't count on it. You need to look for other options at this point. It's very in my personal view, it's very likely that the pause on Iran, especially considering what's happening, may remain throughout this administration, so for the next 3 years or so. So unfortunately, cannot count on that OPT being approved anytime soon.
Thank you all so much.
And by OPT, I mean the OPT employment authorization card, which would allow you to work. Of course, you can get the OPT on your I-20, but that doesn't allow you to work until USCIS issues an employment authorization card, which is on pause. Thank you.
Thank you so much for the clarification. I think we briefly went over question 2, so I'm going to go ahead and skip it. And we'll move to question 3. So someone asks, if I don't use my OPT after a doctorate program, then go and get a STEM master's degree, do I still get OPT? Obviously this is a little bit general, but maybe we can speak to the differences between the programs, if there are any or anything like that, that can maybe help answer the student's question.
So I think it depends, right? So the way that the regulations are written is that you get OPT once at every education level. So technically, let's say you come here and you do your bachelor's degree, you can have OPT. If it's a STEM degree, you qualify for STEM OPT. Then you go for your master's, finish that, you can do the same thing. You get OPT, STEM OPT. Then your PhD, same thing. In this scenario, if you're doing your doctorate program, there might be a chance that you've done your master's already. And so it might be considered a second master's. At that point, you don't have access to OPT regardless of whether it's a STEM degree or not. You do have access to CPT, curricular practical training. So if you enroll in a program that has an internship program as part of its curriculum, and you are able to enroll in that as one of your requirements, you can work through that. I think that since if you haven't done a master's and it's doctorate and then a master's, so I think potentially that OPT would be available, but I would invite my panelists to provide any insight of what they've seen on that.
I don't have anything to add on that.
Yeah, I don't have anything to add either. Yeah. I wonder if if not using a doctorate, if not using OPT after a doctorate program and then getting a STEM master's degree, if that's a strategic way to maintain status. And if like that's why the question was written as is, and I think Shahpour was hinting towards that as like an avenue to
Yes.
maintain
Yeah.
status. So this looks like a good strategy, if that was intended to be part of the question. And it might, be leaning into question 4 too. So
Yeah, so this will be a great jump to question 4, which is, can a SEVIS record be transferred if a OPT application is still pending and the student is admitted into a PhD program?
Yes. As Shahpour was saying at the beginning. So CVIS is controlled by ICE, and I know that sounds scary, like, oh gosh, ICE, but that is the agency that the CVIS system is operating under. And so, as he mentioned, there's no pause on the processing of I-20s or the transferring of records in the CVIS system because it's not a USCIS system. So if you have an OPT application pending, it's not going to be adjudicated as of us talking today anytime soon. But your CVIS record continues with that school. You're able to transfer to another school in the same classification. So if it's F1, going to F1, which is what the situation is here, you absolutely can do that. That's not a problem.
I just want to add that, and this is coming from experience from consultations last year, when there was a lot of heat over international students and CVIS is getting revoked. Something to be careful, and I don't usually suspect this from the Iranian student international community because most of you guys are very resourceful and excited about getting an education and all of that and follow the rules. But if something goes wrong within your life that could jeopardize your ability to stay in the US, so if you get in trouble or if you don't attend your classes like you were supposed to, don't meet the hours that you were supposed to meet through your classes, then this transfer, you definitely should talk to an immigration attorney and see if it makes sense. But based on the laws, Rogine put perfectly, it shouldn't be a problem.
Thank you guys so much. Before we move on from OPT, I just wanted to, Shahpour, you mentioned that there may be other options. I don't know if you guys want to touch on that a little bit before we move on from this section. Not sure, but up to you guys.
Uh, in, I mean, would depend on each individual situation, but in general, I would say, for example, marrying a U.S. citizen would be an option if that's the case, for filing for residency, even though it's on, again, as we said, everything is on pause, but everything can be filed. Another option could potentially be if the individual is eligible for asylum, to file for asylum. So those are probably the most two common options depending on each individual's situation.
And I would just add that, we kind of touched on this already, but if you're a student and you're finishing your program this year and it looks like nothing's changing, or you're waiting for OPT or your STEM OPT and you're finishing that 180-day extension period and you're like, what am I supposed to do? As we mentioned, your I-20 can be transferred to a new program. And, if you intend to pursue a new program and they offer CPT as part of the program, um, you can transfer your CBIS record and enroll in a new program. So that is an option within the F1 classification you could consider as well.
Perfect. Thank you so much. So let's move on to work authorizations and green cards. It's a little bit of a heavier section, but on to our first question, which is, what would you suggest for someone who did not win the H-1B lottery and has no more OPT?
There are several options, and let's just put aside the pause because I think that keeps going to keep coming into play. But putting that aside, if you don't get selected for the H-1B lottery, that doesn't mean that you can't have an H-1B visa, and H-1B status. And what I mean by that is you can do an H-1B cap exempt. So if you work for a university or a organization, a nonprofit organization that's affiliated with a higher ed institution or a nonprofit that does research, you don't have to go through the lottery and still get H-1B status. And other options would be doing an O1 visa if you're eligible, if you meet the O1 standards. It's for people with extraordinary ability, and those are the two common ones that I usually see for Iranian students specifically.
Some of our clients, so let's say you're working on OPT and you're with a company that has another entity in another country. So let's say they have an entity in Ireland, for example. They could place you there. I mean, obviously you'll have to do the immigration stuff to get there, but I use Ireland because it's been pretty easy, easier than other countries to do this. If they have an entity there and it's a parent subsidiary, affiliate, or branch, you work there for a year in either a managerial, executive, or specialized knowledge capacity. After a year, they could file an L1A or an L1B for you to transfer back to the States. But again, a lot of this conversation is assuming there isn't a travel ban and there isn't a pause. So if we're talking about stateside stuff right now, imminently, I think some of the things that we talked about earlier, which is, transferring to another program or asylum, the things that we were talking about earlier would, be kind of more imminently the option. But my option is very just like Yalda June's, which is, there's these options generally.
Just to add that unfortunately, currently there is no option with considering the pause to get full-time employment authorization for an individual who doesn't already have employment authorization.
And Rogene's been at the sort of the forefront of this with IABA, but we are, with IABA and AILA, working towards seeing a solution for this specifically for Iranian individuals in America, given everything that's happening in Iran. So we don't have an answer for it yet and right now, but litigation and advocacy is in place to hopefully see some change to this. But as Shahpour pointed out, and we all know about litigation, it takes time, and no answer is immediate.
And just to add to what Yalda said, we actually, as an organization, led a coalition letter that was sent to the administration on Monday that specifically urged the administration. So it was sent to Trump, USCIS, ICE, DOS. It was sent to lift the pause and urging them to lift it. So we've done that. We're also, making sure that we're uplifting stories with representatives to put more pressure on the administration as well. So doing what we can from an organization standpoint.
Thank you guys so much. Let's move on to the second question. So, for individuals with a pending I-485 using a I-485 EAD card, what risks arise from law enforcement encounters? What legal protections apply? And how should one weigh the risks of litigation against potential discretionary denial of the application? I know this is a super loaded question, so you guys can take it as you wish and section it how you want.
I can just start by saying if anybody who has valid employment authorization card, you're authorized to work in this country. So there should be no, you may hear of, yes, detentions, arrests happening, but it should not apply to somebody who has a valid employment authorization card and they're working with that EAD, otherwise known as EAD card. That much I can say. Now, I've already gave my opinion about lawsuits, so I'd like to hear more from Rujin John and Yalda John about what you think about lawsuits.
I think with lawsuits, I don't know if I necessarily see I have seen retaliation. I know that that's definitely a concern, so I don't want to undermine that concern. I think it's more the facts of your case. So, are your facts strong enough? Like, are you secure enough for you to file that lawsuit? What is your underlying status? Are you someone who filed while out of status and applied for, a case under 245K or something? If that's a very specific niche thing, but that, you're drawing attention to your status, for example, and whether you applied out of status. They haven't been very nice about that since August 2025. I think it's really fact specific about lawsuits. I will say that you should be really conservative in terms of, who you choose to work with. Be really strategic. A lot of them just got started in terms of filing. Maybe keep an eye out and see how things go in the next 2 months before you decide to file. Because the pause only went into place December 2nd. It got updated January 1st again. So it's been only recently that this has been happening. And it depends on what kind of case it is, right? Shahpour John talked about an I-485 denial. Obviously, it sounds like maybe something else was going on with the I-485. Who knows? Like, we don't know exactly what the reason is. I will say that I will say something positive that I've seen with lawsuits. In speaking with a colleague at the Parsi Quality Center, she had a mandamus done to move the case forward. They scheduled her interview. Interview was done and nothing's happened. So I know a lot of interviews were canceled. So it's interesting to see that the interview was scheduled. So also on the asylum side, asylum was filed, interview was scheduled a month later. Nothing negative has happened. So things have been moving forward. So I don't want to say don't do it, but I think it really depends on the facts of the case. It's very important to speak to an attorney to assess the pros and cons.
And for the I-45 residency application, I'd like to add a reminder that it's discretionary. So again, if USCIS, for whatever reason, they're not ready to approve it, it's not too hard for them, especially now with special memo of extra scrutiny and vetting for Iranians and other travel ban national countries. It's not too difficult for them to find a reason to deny any discretionary application, including an I-485.
Yeah, and I just want to add, like with the Iranian community specifically, like if the I-485 is filed by Iranian male that had some affiliation in the military, this is where I would tread carefully. If, with filing a lawsuit, those cases were getting scrutinized before. A lot of them were getting denied if, the affiliation was with SIPA. And we don't expect any of those to get approved right now. So,
And to give a glimpse of the discretionary factors, so as in end of November, they released a memo about before they put the pause, which basically said if you're a travel ban, a national from a travel ban country, we're gonna consider those issues as negative factors in your case. And our office has seen the RFEs on those cases, and they basically will quote something from the travel ban and say, oh, well, for the country of Burma, for example, it's because I just did a case like this. This is why I know the information, but it's because they have a high overstay rate for B visas, and it was for an H-1B. So we had to respond and overcome that. But that's discretionary, right? That the officer has to review our argument against, what's in an official document issued by USCIS and make a determination. So it's up to an officer to decide how they feel about whether you've overcome the negative discretionary factors.
Thank you guys so much. That was a very large question. Hopefully we got to answer all those sections that you guys were looking for.
I will mention one thing. We didn't say anything about law enforcement. I just want to put in a plug for IABA's website. We have a bunch of resources on there. And so one of them is Know Your Rights interactions with ICE and law enforcement. So if you go to the IABA website, at the top left of the menu, at the top, there is a legal advisory link as a bunch of advisories we've been putting out over the last year, especially with everything that's going on. You have resources, as students and, the travel ban, the pause, as well as law enforcement. I just recommend you take a look. We have a ton of resources there that you can access.
Thank you so much. That's a wonderful suggestion. And we actually have the resources at a later slide so everyone can have access to those great resources IVA's been working so hard on. So yes, we'll definitely have those for all of you at the end of the presentation so you guys can have access to it. So thank you so much for connecting the two. We move on to the next
One
question.
other thing I'd like to add. So as Rujin John mentioned, yes, filing a lawsuit may get one an interview, but these days, even an interview could be risky because there have been arrests at so many adjustment interviews that we had never seen before happening. Sometimes for simple overstay, people are were getting, and we haven't seen it recently, but in San Diego and other offices, Fresno, we saw many arrests just for simple overstays. So getting an interview always is not necessarily, these days, it's not necessarily beneficial, especially when there's a pause and they can't make a decision anyway. Thank you.
Thank you guys so much. So let's go ahead and take on question 3. So will changing employment from academia to a private industry role after an approved NIW petition while awaiting a green card interview and working under an EAD negatively impact the pending adjustment of status? Now, I recognize this is a little bit of a specific question, but if it's generally useful to answer this, if it's a common circumstance, we'd love to hear your insight on it.
Yeah, I think maybe the gist of this question is, whether they're still working within their field of endeavor. So when you're filing for an NIW petition, you prepare what's called a statement of intent, where you tell USCIS essentially the work that you're going to be doing in the United States with the green card that you're going to get hopefully in the near future. Changing roles from academia to the private industry won't be problematic typically if it's still within the field. So I usually use the most dramatic example, but it's just to make a point, is let's say you wanted to be a chiropractor and you filed your NIW petition based on that, wanted to work at a chiropractor office. You can't then, change your mind and say, you know what, I'm going to become a singer instead. It's completely different. But if you were teaching as an economist, right, in statistics or economic class at a university, and then you got this really good job at a private company, still doing similar research within the field of economics, you should be okay. But this is very fact specific, but I think that's probably where the question was driving from, is whether they're still working in the same field.
I agree with everything Yalda said. Yeah.
Me too.
Perfect. So question 4 is, for an individual with dual citizenship, where one nationality may be subject to heightened scrutiny, for example, Iranian, who entered the United States on a F1 visa, worked pursuant to OPT, and was recently selected in the H-1B lottery. Could dual citizenship affect the adjudication or approval based on the H-1B position? And if so, what alternative visa options might be available? Now, this one is also a little bit more specific, but if this is a common circumstance or if you can give any insight as to alternative visa options, we'd be very grateful.
I, I can, would you like to go,
No,
Rujin?
please go ahead.
I was just going to say, unfortunately, unlike the travel ban on visas that based on the passport that one applies for, USCIS pause is not dependent on the citizenship and the passport. It also the place of birth. So for dual nationals born in Iran, unfortunately, the pause applies. That's very unfortunate, but that is the case. So one may have, for dual nationals, may have an option. Well, the problem is that if the H-1B petition hasn't been approved, it can't get approved. If one are because of the pause, but if somehow somebody already has an H-1B petition approved, then they have the possibility of going abroad and apply for an H-1B visa on their passport of the country that's not a travel ban country. But again, that is not possible right now because the petition itself cannot be approved by USCIS. The only exception I can see is for some visas for Canadians. Well, because Canadians don't need a visa, that's more case specific, so I'm not going to get into that. But there may be some exceptions for Canadian dual nationals, Iranian Canadians. Again, not to do with USCIS, but whether, for example, as an example, whether they can get a TN at the border because the TN is issued by CBP at the border, and the USCIS pause does not apply to it, just as an example.
Yeah, I will say that we have a few people who are Iranian nationals who were put in the lottery this last month, and they were selected, and they're very aware that unfortunately, they can have an H-1B petition filed on their behalf, but they're not going to be adjudicated. And one of them's a dual national of from the UK and was born in Iran, so that's the problem. So options go back to what we were talking about earlier, which is, you continue, like you transfer to another F1 program, maybe you find a day one CPT program, or, the options, the humanitarian options that were discussed. But again, no adjudications are really happening right now.
I don't have anything to add.
Perfect. So let's move on to, I know we talked a little bit about how IAB has some resources around this, but I thought we could speak a little bit upon it here because students had some questions regarding their rights. So the first one is, if a student is contacted by immigration authorities or encounters an issue at the border, what rights do they have and what should they do immediately? Again, to everyone, we do have the resources available after, but we can discuss it a little bit with the panelists here. So please.
Well, immigration authorities can mean various different things. So, if you're contacted by USCIS, maybe you're on, I'm just thinking of work authorized statuses, so it might not apply to students, but they do site visits, for example. So that's more common than not. Contact your employer, contact your employer's attorney, make sure you're allowed to say, hey, come back another day, or I'll call you when I'm ready, and have an attorney there. With regard to if you encounter ICE, the basics are that you have the right to remain silent, you have the right to, and with they do not sign anything without legal advice, I think is my biggest thing with ICE and anyone actually, even at the ports of entry. They might try to get you signed documents that affect your immigration status, including voluntary departure. I think that was a big thing, especially last year we were seeing. So never sign anything without talking to an attorney, especially if you don't understand the information in it. We do there, you have the, and if it's ICE or, CBP, you have the right to contact your consulate. I know that we don't have that one here. It'd be kind of a little bit difficult, but you do have that right generally. And then at ports of entry, just know that, your phone they can access it. So, uh, I hate saying it this way, but you're kind of at the bottom of the totem pole when it comes to rights at the ports of entry. So you just be ready. They can search your phone, and they have access. They can ask for access to your phone.
A couple of things I would add is that first, at any point of entry, airport or otherwise, there is no right of representation. Even though you can always ask to call your attorney, they may or may not give you that option. And then with devices, yes, I agree with what Regine said, but if you don't allow them to see what's on the device, then the device can be confiscated, basically. That's what would happen to the device. Then I also want to clarify about ICE enforcement. So ICE has, which stands for Immigration Custom Enforcement, has two components. So most of ICE activities that these days we hear in the news are the enforcement parts of ICE, enforcing immigration laws. The other part of ICE is investigations. And especially for Iranians, sometimes they come into contact with that part of ICE, which most people do not. When ICE wants to, for example, interview especially international students especially these days, for those who have connections with Iran, it's possible that the ICE may contact you, ICE investigations may contact you to do an optional interview, which would be basically about your contacts and connections to Iran. I've seen that recently happen to somebody, to an asylum who entered as a visitor and is an asylum applicant. In prior administrations, it was very common for FBI to contact Iranian students for optional interviews. And that's when you want to speak to an immigration attorney to make an informed decision whether you would like to proceed with that optional interview or not. Thank you.
I would just add one more thing. Always have your documents on you anywhere you are. I mean, that's a requirement generally to have your identification, but have a copy of your most recent I-20 and I know it's annoying to have it, but have a copy of that. You have an EAD, have your EAD on you, not a copy. Have your identification on you.
I
Amazing.
just
Oh,
will really quick add in about the searches of the phone. And the panelists correct me if I'm wrong, but as far as I know, they can only search what they see. So, at the time of travel, if you have, we all have things that we consider to be our privacy rights, right? And if there are things that you want to take off of your phone and put in the cloud, to my understanding, they don't have access to that. Just as a thought when traveling.
The only thing I would say is I don't think most Iranian students are traveling right now generally, but and maybe I shouldn't have even brought up phones at the border, but I think that the thing is the facial, like being able to open your phone with your face. I think they can get access to that, and that's the issue. And so a lot of the recommendation is to turn that off because there's lots of, testimony about them use like putting the phone in front of someone's face to open it, and then they do what they want to do and they can access things on the cloud and stuff. So some people travel with burner phones if you're traveling, so, as attorneys, we have our emails and stuff that we have to think about. So these are some of the conversations that I hear going on. Some people will completely wipe their phone clean of anything, so they don't have to worry about those things. But I think the big thing is the facial recognition to open the phone and gives them access.
Thank you guys so much. So questions 2 and 3, we pretty much covered. If there's anything you guys want to add, I'll give you guys a moment to think.
I would just add to that. I would say that anyone who travels abroad these days, anything that you do not want Custom and Border Protection to see, it's best not to have it with you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's the easiest. And as Rujinjan mentioned, that's what a burner phone or a travel phone is for.
Yeah. I think we can talk about number 3. So, assuming you can travel and you have the ability to travel and you're on F1 and you filed an I-140, the I-140 itself doesn't prevent you from travel. We are in different times, but really, I would say that it's when you file the I-485 where you're expressing immigrant intent, and that's where you want to really think about whether to travel or not. I don't know what the circumstances are for the person who included this question, but the question is, if you're filing like an I-140, whether it's EB2, EB1, EB3, whatever it is, and your priority date's not current, it's right now, not really considered that you've expressed immigrant intent because a green card's not available to you. And that's been pretty good for now. I would say maybe in these times to be more conservative but generally speaking, if you just have an I-140 on the file, there's nothing that prevents you from traveling. Whereas if you have an I-485, you're expressly expressing your immigrant intent. I don't know if anyone else has seen anything else lately.
I would caution on it. For me, it depends on how the I-140 was filed.
Yeah.
If the I-140 was filed for adjustment of status, that would be one factor for immigrant intent. Even though I agree pretty much with everything Rujinjan said in normal times, but if the I-140 is filed for adjustment, then that they can use that as a factor for immigrant intent. While if it is filed for consular processing option, then I agree that there should be no issue.
Yeah, those are my thoughts. I think for most, if not all, F1s that I've done in the past, I check off consular processing because of this, because it is a non-immigrant visa, so we want to protect the client if they're traveling. But I think the theme of tonight is do not travel right now. So
Just one last point I think would be helpful for people on that is, would you say there's any difference between domestic travel and international travel? Would you just be a little bit more conservative for both?
Uh, I was just thinking about that. I wanted to clarify. I do not mean domestic travel.
Yeah.
Everything we mentioned was about international travel. So as long as somebody has a real ID, California, well, your state's real ID or valid passport, and you have your undocumented status, then there should be no issues traveling domestically.
Yeah. I would just add with TSA in the airports now. I just want to second everything Shahpour just said about being in documented status. If you are someone who, for some reason, fell out of status, or you're reinstating something, maybe be a little bit more careful. Um, I think you're like making sure you have documented status is essential right now for just generally.
Uh, 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 and just to clarify, I believe Rujinjan meant that ICE is at many airports.
Yes.
ICE has presence at many airports as of last week or so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Perfect. So we're actually doing so great on time. We're gonna end at 6 and we answered all the questions, so that's so great. Here on the screen, we have the IABA resources. So if you go on IABA_national on Instagram, you can see these. IABA also has a website. So these are great, great, great resources that you guys can look at your own time. So we just wanted to provide these to you guys. And so now we reach the conclusion of our session tonight. I want to give the biggest thank you to the panelists for sharing their time and expertise with us, and most importantly, their kindness with this community. We could not be more
Anita
grateful.
John, may I add one last
Yes,
thing
yes,
before you
please, please.
end? Because I I know what we said overall was pretty gloomy, unfortunately. But I like to uh, tell everybody that to not give up on being here. Do
Yeah.
not leave in my views, do not leave the country until you have had at least the consult with an immigration attorney that you trust before leaving the country. Keep in mind, once you leave the country, under current circumstances, it may be very difficult to return. So make sure to have that consult and make an informed decision before you make the decision to leave the country, to leave the US.
Thank you so much. I think we all needed to end on that note, honestly. If you guys have anything else to add on that note, please, I welcome you before we close out the presentation.
Yeah, I'm a firm believer in things working out the way that they're supposed to, even if it seems like they're not working out the way that we want them to. So I think something that ties most Iranians together is our resilience. And this is definitely a time to show that and, stay resilient and, just know that this too will pass and this administration is not going to be in place, in a few years. And there's litigation going on. We're already seeing some litigation ending successfully, right? Even in the immigration front. So just stay resilient and know that, change is always on the way.
And I just to echo both Shahpour and Yalda, the first administration had challenges, and we didn't think that we would come out on the other side, and we did. So I would say talk to an attorney. There's options out there. They're not the ideal options. Life will make you pivot and you pivot, but definitely talk to someone. There are ways to figure it out and hold on. And, just to give an example of something positive, they lifted the pause on asylum on Monday.
Yeah.
So it's small, but it's not everyone, but just something positive was there. So they're supposed to keep giving reports every 90 days on these things. And I know there are a lot of people trying to hold them accountable, whether they're, so I'd like to stay positive, thinking that they will continue to be forced to do the right thing.
And a follow up to that is yes, that keep in mind for those who may not know, when the administration changed last time on day one, Biden got rid of travel ban. So there is always hope.
Thank you guys so much. So this is why, we chose panelists like you guys. You guys always just so much expertise, so kind to make sure that we end on a positive note even. So I really, 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 on behalf of everyone here, want to thank you guys for your time. I know that you guys are not required to do things like these. You guys do it because you want to. So that's so important for us to be there for a community in times like these. So I really, 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 really appreciate it. And I want to also thank all the board members who helped out on this event, both from ISC and NIALSA. I want to give a great, huge shout out to Yasamin Jun for helping me directly on NIALSA side, Tara Jun, our president, Shadi and Kimia on ISC side. They did so much to help with the outreach and get so many of you to participate in this event. So here are I hope you guys got the screenshot from the previous slide. We can move back. We can stay on for a minute or two if you guys need to take some pictures and stuff. But here's the website for NIALSA, website for ISC, and our respective Instagrams. And we want to thank you all for joining. And I'm so happy that we made it to 6 p.m. to get all your questions. And hopefully, maybe we can look into doing a part two. I know you guys submitted a lot of questions in the chat. Unfortunately, obviously, we were on strict time limit and everything, so we couldn't just ask those questions, and we couldn't really open up for a Q&A just for legal purposes and everything like that. So stay tuned. We do professional events, and hopefully we could do another one in the future. And like everyone said, things can change every day. So I'm hoping and wishing positivity for all of you.
Thank you so much.
Thanks,
Thank,
everyone.
Have a good
thank
evening.
you, everyone.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Bye.